thank you for joining us and welcome to Building Digital Readiness for a New Era. I'm Ange. I'm Chief Transformation Officer for ThoughtWorks, and I'll be hosting us today. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm hosting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands from which you are all joining us today. So I'd like to start actually by introducing my colleague, Gary. So Gary is a director in digital transformation here at ThoughtWorks and is the co-author of one of our most recent publications, the Digital Transformation Game Plan. That book is also referred to sometimes as the ThoughtWorks Handbook. And in conjunction with that, Gary has also been a key driver behind the digital fluency model. This is a transformation framework which draws on the 25 years of experience we have working with different clients in this space. It really just brings together a lot of different ideas and concepts that we've been successfully using with clients over the last couple of decades. So just as a quick setup before we get into the conversation, we all know that we're continuing to be under pressure to evolve quickly in this era of digital and by this resulting shift in business models and in customer expectations. And recent and continuing events are really just accelerating and amplifying that. What we've seen in our experiences with clients and with the organizations that we follow are that organizations that can really adapt and survive in this face of accelerating change are those who ensure that the decisions that they need to make can be identified and flow quickly from idea into decision, into execution, really powered by technology. And we've also observed that there are two key areas or factors that are really key to being able to drive that. And that is the right leadership mindset and the digital technology capabilities that can really empower that execution. And we, always looking for a phrase, we refer to these organizations as digital ready. And we believe that successful leaders and organizations need to ensure that they are actively considering and investing in these areas to be able to not just survive, but thrive in that face of constant change and accelerating change that we find ourselves in. And so, to start this being more conversational than just me speaking at you, I thought my first question for Gary was really one around exploring that concept of digital readiness. So can you share, Gary, a little bit more about what is it and why is it becoming increasingly important?
Yeah, I mean, digital ready is, to me, refers more to the era of digital. Like, you know, we've come out of the agricultural era, the industrial age, the information age. We're now in digital. And so there'll be more after this. But digital ready, to me, says there's a resilience inside your organisation that allows you to deal with the digital era. And I think what COVID's probably done is brought forward that or accelerated our need to get to that, and really highlighted the challenges that we're going to face going forward, and this kind of need to deal with ambiguity, the need to deal with distributed workforces, the need to be able to rapidly scale up and down unexpectedly, these kind of things. So I think digital ready says, is your organisation in a resilient state where it could move at pace to whatever response it needs to make to the market?
Cool. I almost forgot to take myself off mute, but thanks, Gary. So you mentioned their challenges. So what are some of the key challenges that you've seen presented to some of our clients and other organizations that you've spent time with? And what does it look like to actually solve those challenges? Like, we're all very good at identifying problems, but what are the traits or characteristics that we need to nurture to actually step up to those challenges and be successful?
Yeah, it's funny how the conversations I have are very consistent, right? I premise it by saying I think there's a number of phases that companies going to go through coming out of the COVID crisis. So I want to recognise that first. So, you know, step one, ignore anything to do with digital and stuff like that, and just focus on cash flow, receivables, health and safety of your staff, those kind of things. And you know, there's a number of organisations still in that. As you come out of that phase, there'll be this reflection point, like what do we need to focus on? What don't we need to focus on anymore? What should we leave behind? So I think it's really important organisations take advantage of that reflection point. And then after that, there's going to be this, whether it's the new normal, whatever you want to call it, but the world will have changed. And so there'll be these opportunities for you. And so if I think about the conversations I'm having with execs about what is that changed world, so I don't know there's anything unexpected in there. So for a start, the behaviour of customers will have changed, and this kind of heightened expectation of digital access and real-time access to data and information will be there for customers, and it'll continue to change. So the first step would be that ability to respond constantly to a heightened and changing customer expectation. So that's kind of step one. The second thing which we talk about a lot is just an ability to move at pace. So speed, for want of a better word, let's just say speed. And it's speed in time to market, but it's also more increasingly speed in decision making. Like, you're not going to have as much knowledge or information. So how do we make those decisions smaller and less risky? Not as, multi-year and huge numbers and huge commitment of resources. Just how do we make really small, fast decisions to nudge the organisation towards where it needs to be? The next one is kind of related, which is you need to then have the architecture capable of doing that. So I think historically we've built architectures for resilience in a uptime kind of language. It's small change or no change and stability and all these things. Whereas now we need to have an architecture that can have constant, frequent change, where we can experiment, where we can put things into the market and take them down again. Like, it's just a different kind of world, I think, than what we originally built these architectures for. And then lastly, the fourth one, I think, is more relevant to the time we're in with COVID and things, which is this concept of resilience. So it's funny, for years we've talked about scale from an upwards point of view, and I think now we need to understand that elasticity is more important because you need to be able to scale down just as quickly. I think, going after talent and where the talent is, so distributed workforces and working from home, remote working, all those kind of classic stuff, but just having that much more fluid workforce. Resilience means also dealing with security, especially with remote workforces, obviously, but I think if I summarize resilience, to me, it's like not having a single point of failure in anything to do with your operations. I think that's probably what we've learned most out of the last sort of 6 months. So they're the four for me. It's heightened customer expectation, speed, that tech adoption and using technology for value rather than as a cost center, and building resilience.
Cool. So who do you think is, I hate this question actually, but I wrote it, but I still have frustration with it. So who do we feel is getting it right? Knowing that probably not everybody gets everything right, but what are some examples of people getting it right and using this period of disruption, interruption, whatever we want to call it, to create opportunity and upside risk?
It's a weird question for me. Like, I get asked it a lot, and I kind of often respond by just saying, what's the motive for the question? Like, do you want to copy someone? Like, do you think there's like this gold star modern digital business out there that you need to just copy and you'll become one too? Like, it doesn't work that way. So I always kind of preempt the answer to this by saying, don't be looking for that. Like, there are companies doing this well, and I could list off companies. We can talk about REA and Intuit and Southwest Airlines and China Merchant Bank and GoJet. Like, I'm not sure the value in listing these companies, right? What I think is more valuable is to say, there are things that companies who are surviving those four problems better than most have in common. So, there's a visibility, a transparency in their organisation that allows them to align all of their portfolio of work to the outcomes they're trying to achieve. They have this clear line of sight to measuring that we're progressing towards achieving these outcomes. So alignment and visibility is definitely something that they have in common. They have a very modern technology landscape, and they're sort of capitalizing on new tech, emerging tech, as a value add as opposed to a cost. They have a leadership style that's very different, more cultivating, more, custodian, steward, whatever you want to call it. Like, I love those words. So there's some uniqueness in those enterprises that are doing really, really well. But I think if I was to answer, like, how do I go and look for inspiration? How do I go and look for things that I can do for myself? I would say there are kind of these 5 things that, things a bad word, capabilities that you need to think about. So definitely you need to remove friction out of your operating model. You definitely have to think about the way you fund stuff, the way you prioritize, the way decisions get made, your org structure, how you bring teams of people together to achieve stuff. So there are organizations that do that really, really well, like Hire in China. There's companies that just understand how to swarm around achieving value and actually delivering outcomes for an enterprise. That means that their cost base is significantly lower because they're not just planning 12 months in ahead, putting money on the table and spending it regardless of what they learn along the way, right? So they only ever scale the things they know will work, which is quite an interesting sort of simplicity. There's that kind of modernization of their architecture. So whether it's platforms or cloud or whatever you want to go into, there are companies that do that really, really well. There are companies that can meet customer expectation or productize things in a way that meets customer expectation, and that kind of user experience that they're doing very, very well. And it's engaging, and you can tell when you go online yourselves, that, especially sitting home at COVID, I mean, who hasn't been spending crazily and ordering things online? Like, you can tell the companies that have just got that nailed, right? And then there's the classic use of data. Like, I think that's coming to the fore more and more about being able to take information and capture weaker signals and understand what's working, what's not working, using data to generate new product, new value opportunity. The GE classic example of sensors through the planes and how you can add value to the servicing and predictive value to the servicing of plane engines, etc. And then I think, for some people it might be boring, but there's the engineering discipline and practices that have just become so mandatory now, to be able to manage both pace and quality at the same time. So I think for all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we know companies doing each of those elements really, really well. You don't need me to list off companies to tell you who's doing that really, really well. Google will do that for you. But what I think is important is the answer for you as to what you should therefore do and who you should follow is very different for the answer to the next company and the next company and the next company. The whole challenge about what we're facing in digital is, given the outcomes I'm trying to achieve as an organization, as an executive team, given the outcomes we're trying to do, what digital needs for us, how much of each of those 5 things I just talked about do we need for that to be true? So it's going to be different for everybody. And I think that's the thing that we've kind of missed. There's a lot of failed transformations out there that for me have largely come from trying to copy somebody else's thing that worked for them, thinking that somehow that means you'll get the same result. And the companies that have done this really, really well have learned that actually it's a journey of understanding how to learn. It's a journey of changing things and observing their impact, and then scaling the things that work. It's far more important than saying, yep, let's follow ING, let's follow Intuit, let's follow REA and do exactly what they did, because that has to be the way to succeed. I hope that makes sense.
I think that's a really good point. And what I've seen that lead into really interesting conversations with some of the clients I've been working with recently is looking at yourself to understand what you need to do to achieve your own sort of business strategies and plans, but also still looking to others for inspiration. and looking at unexpected places for inspiration. A conversation I had with a client a little while ago in Paris, which was very nice to be in Paris for a client meeting, but it was with a global beverage manufacturer. And when they were thinking about who they were inspired by what they saw BBVA, which is a Spanish bank, doing in terms of opening up the inside of their organization to third parties to be able to access, you know, their data through APIs. And so looking beyond the sort of typical areas of inspiration, I think was a really good point that was made there. The other one is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, at the risk of asking my own question, the other thing I get asked a lot is like, what's stopping everybody from doing that? Like, I just think that there's a simplicity that's been hidden by the complexity of time, right? So over time, we've built organizations and we've added functional units and we've, you know, added org structures and changed org structures and added org structures again. And we do all these things and processes and policies that have really determined the personality of the company that we're working. That they have started to drive decision making. So to me, that's an overbalance. So what's happened is that the systems that we've implemented and the way we function, the engine of the company, is now being used to determine decisions when it should never have been. And so the digital opportunity for me is to kind of come back the other way and say, right, if you had a greenfield, which I know you can't, but if you did, it would be something like, I have an outcome and I'm going to apply a measure to that outcome, right? And this is at the corporate level, corporate outcome. Then I'm going to bring together the people who I know can contribute to us achieving that outcome, and I'm going to give them the measure as the lagging indicator, and then they're going to work out what are the things most likely to progress us towards that outcome that move that measure. So they're going to build work to move the measure, and then they'll apply a leading indicator to that work, and this zigzag will go down until you reach a group of people who have full autonomy to deliver a piece of work that they know will help achieve the outcome. And when they look up, what they'll see is this beautiful alignment between the work they're doing and the outcome that the company's trying to achieve, and a leading indicator totally connected to the lagging indicator of the outcome. It's just such a beautiful simplicity to that. Like, it just makes perfect sense. So actually the challenge here, or the opportunity of digital, is to get rid of the constraints of that engine that is stopping you from having that simplicity.
I think that's a good point. It actually leads in a little bit to one of the questions that we've got there. But I think what I've certainly seen over the sort of last 20 years is we've shifted from technology being the constraint to what is possible, of what we want to do, and have been at the face of that for a long time, to shifting to where for a lot the organization is the constraint. Yeah. And whether that's that it's a startup and you don't have the scale to support, or whether it's, you know, a 50-year-old company that has built the kind of organizational structure that you sort of mentioned there. I think that idea of measure, you know, build to meet that measure is great, but there's a level of, I guess, the simplicity masks a huge level of complexity and challenge in actually being able to do that. So while the concept is simple, what are some of the key challenges that people can expect to face when they're trying to go on that journey?
Oh, that's a tough question. So look, the biggest challenge is politics. In reality, that's the challenge. You know, I had a conversation with a client recently where we talked about, you know, a big project, a big piece of work that they were doing, and it was all about a technology modernization, right? And it was 100% what they should be doing. It was a really smart play, but when we asked why they're doing it, they talked about time. It was all about speed to market. And when we analysed time, that technology piece was really only about 40% of the total time impact on getting to market. And what was really holding them back was the prioritisation process, the decision-making processes, the application for funding, the political gaming that has to go on between functional business units who feel they have ownership of certain things that go on inside the enterprise. So in other words, they completely lost the sight of the customer. And actually, rather than all being in it to achieve something for a client, they were all in it for their functional unit. That's by far one of the greatest challenges. The second biggest challenge is still that technology piece, which is that we have legacy architectures built for a different purpose, built for a different reason. And we now need to go through the process of modernizing that. And sometimes when you break those two technologies apart, which happens way too often, it's very hard to fund the technology one because it's looked at as an IT thing. And, one of the things I talk about with clients a lot is this concept of a thin slice. Now, some people in the IT world have heard of thin slice for a long time. It's something that gets done in software delivery, and it's done to incrementally achieve the result. You kind of take that up to a program level. There's a concept of a thin slice, which might be about testing a product in the market. So it might be minimum viable product, or it might be whatever terminology you might use for that. When I'm talking about a thin slice, I'm talking about that from an enterprise level, a thin slice from executive to developer. And what we're trying to test out is antibodies. So in other words, we're trying to flush out the things inside your organization that are going to stop that simplicity, things inside your organization that are going to raise their head as blockers. It could be something really simple like, thinking of some that I've been through. The legal and regulatory group have a service level agreement with the business or with IT that they'll get back to them with approval within 6 weeks. And I'm trying to release every 2. So that's a serious problem because it's policy, it's process, it's amount of people in LRC that we've got available to do it. So it could be something quite tactical like that you uncover. But using that thin slice approach to identify the antibodies and then understand for you and your organization, which is a unique thing, which ones do we live with, which ones can we get rid of, which ones do we need to adapt. So I think that's the right approach to making significant change. And then I think if you added another thin slice, once you learned that, see if it works again, add a next one, now you can validate that your learnings are true, and then away you go, and everything sort of folds into that new way.
I also think, one of the philosophies that drive the way that I work, and this is at ThoughtWorks and also as a consultant, is, I'm a risk-based leader from way back. So I like to compartmentalize and break things down into smaller steps. And what I've seen repeatedly with clients, but also in the way that we transform ourselves, is that creating those slices gives you the ability to provide leadership from the top without having to know everything. But it also gives the ability to remove roadblocks, to be able to really demonstrate progress, and every slice that you execute gives greater strength to the next slice because you've got those stories of success to draw on. And my experience has certainly been that the politics will always exist. And so there's a level of how can you create new wins of inspiration, new winds of, I was going to say winds of change, but everyone will start listening. But new sort of pieces that motivate different aspects of politics and new ways of people being able to see how they can be successful in a future organization. Because a lot of that blocking, I think, is people that feel, well, I've been successful in the role I've been playing, how I've been playing it for the last decade. You're asking me to do things differently. If you're threatened by that, a lot of people are naturally going to shut down. And I think by demonstrating that actually, if you're great at your particular functional role or your role, that's still the core of the job. What we're doing is trying to slice things up a little bit differently to be able to actually amplify your success. And that, I think those aspects of change management, which are quite traditional change management concepts, are still really key here. And I think can sometimes be overlooked by some technology-centric implementations that sort of overlook those broader political pieces. And it's one of the things I've loved about working with the team that we have, which is the level of curiosity that our people have about everything means that you can't help but get involved in the human as well as the technology. Those traditional change.
Politics is an interesting word, and to make it a bit real, I want to just drop it below theoretical level a little bit and say, one of the things I always challenge leaders about is, do you have the courage to make the change necessary that you may find out? And what I mean by that is, And go back to that kind of greenfield simplicity cascade that I talked about before. Like when you start to understand the real value work, the things that could really accelerate your business, it may tell you some stuff about your current business that are going to be really uncomfortable. And it might be things like you might only have 60% of the skill base necessary to do the work that you've now discovered is the right work to do. You may find out that the big project that's been going on for 5 years is actually not the thing that's going to get you to where you thought you were going to get to. So there's things in there that are going to be quite confrontational. And, you know, I find I spend a lot of time with leadership groups just talking about how to unpick decisions and commitments that we previously made. How do you save face to step up and go, actually, that was wrong, right? Like it's not the right thing to do anymore. And we're going to stop it and we're going to change what we're doing. And some of those things are more Maslow-based challenges of humans to make those decisions. So I do think there's a real human element to leading in this that we need to provide a lot of support, a lot of help to.
Okay. Cool. So then looking forward, I mean, we've been talking about, you know, embracing change in the face of accelerating continuous sort of evolution and step changes in the market. So that digital era stuff was already there. We've then more recently been in a period of pretty considerable disarray. And out of disarray can either come greater disarray or can come sort of something really constructive in terms of a path back. So when you look at the future, which is probably more uncertain today than it has been for a while, or at least feels that way, what do you think comes next? Or if that's too hard, what do you think leaders in the organizations that really want to embrace this and thrive, what should we be thinking about? What should we be focusing on?
Yeah, I'm a bit of an optimist when it comes to this, and I recognize that. I am a believer that the next era of business is humanistic, and what I mean by that, it's the counterbalance to tech, where we understand that technology is actually for the benefit of society, and so this humanistic era is much more about work-life synergy. I understand, but I'm just trying to separate it from work-life balance, right? So work-life synergy to me is that society becomes an ecosystem where work fits in with everything else that you do in your life. And, you know, there's not this kind of 9 to 5. It's like everything interconnects and works together. And when you do have to go into the office, it feels much more relaxed and more closely linked to normal life for you, whether that's being able to go out and shoot some hoops during a lunch break, or whatever it might be. And I know some of that sounds corny, but I do see this massive shift towards humanism, now whether that's the customer or the employee. And I believe right now we're starting to see the front edge of that, which is companies who are excelling at employee connection or customer connection are excelling in the market. And you can statistically see that on the S&P 500 or wherever you want to look for it. You can see the result of the companies that are doing that. And one of the big drivers behind that is this word ownership, which I love. So ownership, imagine your employees feeling a sense of ownership for the work that they're doing and for the result of that work in the way it impacts on the organization's success. There's just a different psychology to an ownership sense. And that also comes with a sense of belonging, I guess. But this sense of ownership, if you think about that just for your own self, like if you owned something, how do you treat it? How do you think about it? What kind of level of detail do you go to in how you do it is much, much different to if it's just, I'm doing it because it's my next task or it's my next project or it's what I'm paid to do. There's just such a shift to that I think is really important. So when you see, like I talk some of the corny things around, you know, if I sell outdoor products, I know this is a popular example, but if I sell outdoor adventure products and I employ staff who are outdoorsy types, I get a much different connection. if I'm a bank and I'm focused on putting people into a home versus selling mortgages, I get a much different connection. And there's enough evidence for me personally that the accelerator in business success surrounding those kind of approaches is phenomenal. Like, it's phenomenal. And so I do believe that's what comes next, is that we have this more humanistic approach. Technology is the driver behind that. It's technology for collaboration, technology to reduce borders, technology to innovate, that will bring some of that. So yeah, I'm bullish about it. Like, I'm quite excited about it. It requires us to leave stuff behind. And what I hope, if anything positive comes out of this COVID craziness, is that it's given us enough pause in time that it may not be worth starting off some of those things that we've been doing, and it may now be worth looking to that future and going, maybe we just go there now. Like, maybe we just accelerate towards that. So fingers crossed that that's the inspiration that the world gets from this.
I hope so too. I mean, I'm also an optimist. I'm also someone who quite enjoys ambiguity. And I think there's an opportunity here that what we're currently experiencing helps people build some more tools and some more resilience around continuous ambiguity. But there's obviously, the other side of that, which is people will batten down the hatches and be more protective of what they currently have. And I think both of those are equally possible. And probably related to that, and I think it also draws on a question that we've been asked here as well, is with that level of, you mentioned outdoorsy people selling outdoorsy equipment, that level of connection and curiosity with technology, I think increasingly all companies, all industries need to consider themselves as information tech industries, as well as retail or air transport or whatever, actual industry they're part of. So given that, what do you feel, or what's your assessment of whether most, and I'm definitely generalizing here, board level execs or, operational execs, is there the knowledge or the experience there, or if there isn't, what do you see as the key gaps?
Yeah, no, there isn't. So that's, I need to think about how I answer that. I mean, that's my day job. That's what I do every day, is I get to talk to companies and boards who are trying to make that shift. And there are some big mental shifts that have to be made. So the expectation of certainty, the 3-year plan, it's just out the door. Like, it's just crazy to ask for. It's crazy to think about. So even for a board now, what do we have to think about is more about direction with minimum constraint.